Welcome, Jensen. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Mark.
We've been talking on and off on the phone and emailing and having dinner with staff, and it's finally time for a face-to-face, which I'm really excited about.
Thanks.
There are 85 reasons why I thought it would be great to have you here. The most obvious of which is our Uber theme, which is emerging platforms. Now, most of these folks have been reading SNS for a while, and they are probably, I happen to know what your technical religion is on this, and they're probably right in the middle of that mainstream. So we as a group have been waiting for a while for what we call XY computing, or massive parallel computing, to start to take a share from CPUs and from CPU-like projects. And when I think of anybody in the world who probably knows more about where that's been and where that's going, you're the guy. So I'd like to start by talking about emerging platforms from the perspective of a guy who's the CEO and founder of the chip company that's going to drive this whole thing forward. And when you look at emerging platforms today and where you think the world's going to go 5 years from now, how does that world look to you?
Well, that's a fabulous question. It's we develop technologies that are going to show up in devices 5 to 10 years from now. And so we have to start imagining what these devices can do and should do, and hopefully delight people when they get there. Just as a background in framing our company, we're the world's largest computer graphics or computer technology company, and it's computer graphics technology company. And you could see our technologies in all kinds of areas. Whether it's in broadcast with augmented reality effects, such as the strobe motion effects that you'll see in the Olympics, or the yellow for our first down line on the NFL. Those kind of augmented reality effects to the way people design cars, making commercials, enjoy video games and PCs and game consoles, and all kinds of areas, including cars from Audi and many more to come. And so we're in the area of computer graphics technology, visualization technology. We're investing in 3 areas, and it's very much dead center of the topics that you guys are talking about today, which is the PC used to be the most important computing device in our lives, but going forward, we imagine that it would just be one of the most important computing devices in our lives. And so we're investing in 3 areas. We're investing, number one, in an area that you just mentioned called parallel computing. We happen to believe that utilizing the GPU, which is inherently a naturally parallel processor, to bring parallel computing to the world is likely the best vehicle. We already invest an enormous amount of R&D in building this processor. If we could just make it more flexible so that we could use the processor for algorithms aside from visually rich algorithms, we could really contribute to the future of computer architecture. Right. We started this journey about 5 years ago, and the results have just been fabulous. The results are, I was telling you earlier that I was going to bring a real-time fire simulator to the fire conference, and maybe I'll do that next year. But using a computer to simulate fire in real time, it's just an idea that's just pretty fabulous. Instead of using art only to create special effects, we can now use simulations and algorithms to create special effects that are living and breathing and interacting.
A lot of people don't appreciate the difference between those two things. I just happen to know from having worked in virtual environments. So they see a picture, they think it's a picture.
Right.
And they don't recognize the difference between a photograph or an image and what you're talking about, which is taking a data set, a database, and redrawing that in real time based on physics principles, gas flow, or whatever it's going to be.
Exactly.
so that everything you're seeing there is actually a data point, not a picture.
That's right.
And it creates a picture by doing it right.
That's right. And the business that we're in, another way of saying that is the business that we're in is in synthesizing what is apparently reality instead of replaying a capture of reality. Right. Whether it's a photograph or a video, they're captured a representation of reality. And so in our world, we try to synthesize and create that alternative reality. So John was talking about World of Warcraft earlier. Obviously one of the most important, persistent alternative worlds the world's ever known. And and we love working with the guys, and where World of Warcraft is going to go someday, it's just truly, truly amazing. So parallel computing is one of the areas that we're investing. We also think that the PC, although for a lot of people, they think that the PC is maturing, we just happen to believe that it's at a pause as technology revolutionizes it again. So even the PC is going to get revolutionized.
This is a refresh moment.
Yeah, it's a refresh moment. Yeah. Parallel computing will refresh the PC, no doubt. I mean, one of the things that we believe is if we bring another 100 times, 100-fold, 1,000-fold more capability, 25% is incremental. 1,000 times is completely discontinuous. All of a sudden, software developers around the world are going to find new ways of using the computer and creating new experiences.
I don't know why I'm doing this, but I want to challenge you. I don't think you're being conservative. Is that fair? I think 1,000 times is a kind of a small number for what you could pull out of your head if you really want.
1,000 times, it is conservative. I'll grant you that. And let me tell you why your math actually works, makes my math work conservatively. For the last 4 or 5 years, Moore's Law has been on a slightly different trajectory. And the reason for that is because sequential processing, by running transistors faster, is simply not a very efficient way of processing for many types of algorithms. And so going to parallel computing, going to parallel processing, enables us to effectively make up for the lost time of Moore's Law. We will, over the course of the next several years, make up for what is apparently 10 years of Moore's Law slowing down, if you will, when we're all said and done. Over that time, if you would have accumulated the benefits of parallel computing, it could be many, many hundreds of folds and thousands. Yeah.
Right. So this kind of leads into a conversation you and I had on the phone about the very nature of what I since then have decided to call the problem landscape. And when say 10 years ago, 5 years ago, when someone looked at this issue of the CPU and of parallel processing, there was a constant hitting of a roadblock, and it was described in one of several ways. Either we didn't know how to write the software properly for the old problems to go across many processors, or we didn't have compilers that could do that same job, so you kind of hit a wall. And it doesn't matter, you have 64,000 processors, but if we didn't know how to do that, it didn't really help very much. And I'm suspicious that what's happened, the change that has happened isn't so much that we finally solved the old problem, but that it has diminished in relative importance as the new problems have emerged, which kind of began in gaming and high visualization applications, but now are almost everywhere. So where don't you want to see video? Where don't you want to have multiple things happening at once? And everything that we do in our lives is composed of these things. And it seems as though the world has basically come to you with GPUs, and that allows the freedom of new designs for solving what we now today call a new problem landscape.
Yeah, and it's a classic chicken and egg problem. On the one hand, if you don't have a processor architecture that's efficient to do parallel computing, people won't learn how to program it. If people don't learn how to program it, that sensibility and that knowledge wouldn't go into compilers. And if it doesn't go into compilers, then more people don't end up programming it. And so it's a bit of a chicken and the egg problem. We felt that the first job for the industry was to figure out how to get a parallel computing architecture. We call it CUDA. We worked with Microsoft, and it's called Direct Compute. In the industry, it's called OpenCL. There's a lot of different ways to program these parallel architectures now. But first you had to just create the parallel architecture that actually delivers on the speed up. If you came up with an architecture and it was incredibly hard to program and you got 2 times, well, you just wait. Yeah. The best thing to do is just wait. Wait until technology gets 2 times faster, which is, 2 times faster is about 3 or 4 years. Just wait. You have to create an architecture that delivers 50 times, 100 times, 200 times speed up, in which case the software programmer says, wow, I can now do something that was simply impossible to do. It's like a time machine. I can now do things that I would have to wait 10 years or 20 years from now to do today. And so now you've created an architecture that inspires software programmers. Unfortunately, it's hard to program. However, because the return on investment is so great, enough people do it, and before you know it, tools get developed on it. Now there's all kinds of tools for CUDA and OpenCL all over the world. It's going into, our GPUs are now going into the world's fastest supercomputers. By the end of this year, you're going to see it crop up in some of the world's fastest supercomputers. And so,
I mean, you are actually in the world's future fastest supercomputer, if I understand it.
Oak Ridge National Lab is going to put our GPUs into the next fastest supercomputer in America. And it's and so you see all of a sudden the architecture delivers that speed up and that incredible productivity benefit. As a result, more tools and more software developers. So I think that virtuous cycle is kicked off. Our responsibility was inventing the architecture, and the second responsibility was getting it everywhere.
Yeah.
And the reason why the GPU was perfect to do it with is because the GPU has a day job.
Gaming.
The day job is to play games.
Sure.
And so we have the ability to get hundreds of millions of GPUs with this architecture out into the world. I think we're coming up on 200 million or so. It is now effectively pervasive. It is now effectively pervasive. There are no workstations in the world that can't benefit from parallel computing today. There are no supercomputers that won't benefit from parallel computing. And there are no consumer products that won't benefit from it. And then all of a sudden, as a result of that, these killer apps are starting to show up. Computers that see you. So computer vision is just going to be completely transformed. Computational photography. All of a sudden, using image processing techniques, we could compensate or do things with a digital or algorithmic camera or
that's
lens.
That's truly evil. Now we're talking about Photoshop on the fly, right?
Oh, Photoshop that refocuses.
Yeah, right.
Photoshop that refocuses. Oh, wow, I didn't like the way that focused. I'm going to refocus my image. So there's all kinds of new capabilities that are starting to evolve. Content that isn't pre-canned, if you will, with art, but now simulated for real time.
This is beyond Avatar, because what's going to happen, and if what you're saying is true, is you want a couple of lines in your face, I can arrange that, right? And so we don't even have to, as Avatar did, they have like 3 camera types, and you know, you do the green screen bit, forget the green screen, just change you on the fly.
Well, you know, the technology that we're creating is helping. Obviously, the Avatar movie was made with a lot of our technology as well, and next generation avatars. We're going to create even more tools to help them make the movies even more inspiring and more awesome, if you will, awesome to the point of eerie. And it's that kind of experience we would like to bring to the home, and that's why we decided to develop a technology called 3D. 5 years ago, we started working on 3D glasses for computers. And at first, everybody said, you know, Jensen, that's just too goofy. Nobody's going to wear glasses when they're playing computers. But, you know, we wear headphones when we listen to music. We wear glasses when we ride our bikes. Wearing gear when you do something, do an activity, is something that's pretty sensible and pretty common in a lot of other areas. And so we decided to develop this area. Now, when you're enjoying 3D content in 3D, you are really suspended in it. World of Warcraft in 3D is just freaky because you're inside it.
Yeah.
And we're making it better and better all the time. And so I think this alternative universe is really starting to happen. Now the next challenge for us is to make this experience possible wherever you are, and that's why we're investing in the third area in our company called mobile computing. We created a processor called Tegra. And we realized that the PC architecture, if you will, the computer architecture that we know and love today, was created for an AC environment. I mean, you plug it into the wall, and that's where it evolved. And we used all kinds of clever engineering techniques to reduce the power, and we call that power management. We happen to think that if we started from a blank sheet of paper and created an architecture completely from scratch that economizes on any little drop of energy that it uses, that we could start the whole Moore's Law revolution again. And we created this architecture called Tegra. The first processors, the first products that it went into, the Microsoft Zune HD and the Microsoft Kitten phones. But the second generation Tegra is going to show up in all kinds of areas. All of a sudden, tablets, laptop computers where the processor is in the back of the screen instead of the keyboard. Just thinking about that for a second. If I just put all of the electronics behind the touch panel, and there's no more electronics underneath the keyboard, what is the difference between a laptop and a tablet? All these interesting folio devices are going to start to show up. And so Tegra is going to show up in smartphones and tablets and notebooks and in automobiles all over the world. So this is I think we're seeing this is exactly the proliferation of computing devices as appliances that Ray was talking about earlier today. I mean, this is that manifestation in reality.
Mm-hmm. So if you're a user, you're talking a lot about Moore's Law, but from just a human being perspective, we're living in a world still which is pretty much CPU driven for our problem solving. And if you're a business owner, it's the same thing. Now the cloud's showing up, so that's going to change things quite a bit. But it strikes me that one of the human issues involved in this is that you get a bit indoctrinated into the easy serial problem world that you learned was running Word or something on a computer, and you're not fully aware of what could be. And so if what you're describing really comes to pass, say in 5 years, I sit down to a netbook or to a iPad or whatever it's going to be, and I go like this, what could happen as I'm doing that is so much larger than before. So instead of just typing up a spreadsheet or something, I could be managing, make up a number, some large number of processors, each of which is tasked to do something out on the cloud.
It's really true. If you just extrapolate very simply what these mobile devices will do, and obviously we're building the processors that make that possible now. Imagine this mobile device. Your tablet is truly going to be a window. I mean, there's no reason why you can't hold it up and just look around, and you're inside a virtual space. So that virtual space will be 3D. You're literally moving inside this window. This tablet will see you. Computer vision will be sufficiently good enough that it will see you. When you're having a video conference with somebody, instead of that person looking off into some weird place where you're not sitting, you actually will make eye contact. You actually will make eye contact. We will take the 2D, we'll transform it into 3D, we'll warp it, and we'll make it follow you. And so all kinds of wonderful ideas come as a result of motion, computer vision, augmented reality, three-dimensional graphics.
Yeah.
So we're not in the microprocessing business. We're in the experiential processing business. We're about creating technologies and also inspirations for the world, so that we can make the computer just more enjoyable and more productive and more fun to use.
Right. So I'm going to propose a kind of a vision. You've been talking about folio size. We call it carry along, or as people call it netbook. It's 9 by 7 inches roughly. It's about the size that Steve picked for the iPad. And we've thought at SNS that would be the best selling computer of all time. And so far so good. And this year it is certainly the fastest growing format of all time. And latest sales of the iPads would just underline that. It was true already before that. So the vision is, here's a headache. I got files on this thing. I've got this. I got the phone. I got the computer. I've got the cloud. I'm told this is all going to work together, but it doesn't really yet. And I work at the office. I travel around. I'm mobile. I'm sitting down. And wouldn't it be nice if I just had my one darn thing? So let's call that the Nvidia pad. And I take it wherever I go, and you can't pry it from my cold, dead hand. It's like, this is what I use pretty much for everything, just as you just described. And so now I'm going to an office environment. Instead of sitting down to a big desktop computer, which may be somewhere either in the cloud or under my chair, it makes sense to me that I would just take this thing and put it down, and there's a screen that's 4 times larger that lights up, right, thanks to Qualcomm, which we'll talk about later. And there's a keyboard there, which, thanks to Qualcomm, is connected to the CPU or the GPU of this, and I'm up.
Right.
And I'm fully mobile. I'm sitting there. I get up. I go away. I come back. I go to talk to somebody. I bring it with me. Doesn't matter. And so I've achieved kind of the ultimate melding of mobile computing and of the benefits of stationary computing through wireless connections. Does that sound right to you?
Well, in fact, you already see it. Let me give you one of my favorite special effects, if you will, the Zune HD. When you take the Zune HD and you go home and you dock it into this little dock, and that dock is connected to your television, the user interface changes. It transforms from a touch UI to a living room remote control UI. Why can't you use that same metaphor when you have a mobile phone, you get to your office? Why dock it, first of all? It'll be wireless. When you simply sit down, that mobile phone is a computer, and all of a sudden what your experience is now on your screen. I think those experiences are absolutely going to be the future.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm excited about it. The thing that's about, you mentioned in the first time you and I talked, you mentioned that your favorite form factor is a form factor that's approximately the size of a book. And the reason why the book form factor has lasted so long is because it feels natural in our hands. I think there's a lot of merit to that. And it is the case that the most popular form factor, after a lot of discovery all over the world around tablets, the most popular form factor will likely be something around 9 to 10 inches. And I think there's a big deal around the tablet that people are starting to grok with now, and that is the whole idea of leisure computing. The vast majority of us don't do professional computing. The vast majority of humanity don't use computers as a workstation,
right,
because they are not working. They're just leisurely having their lives. And leisure content far, far, far exceeds the size of the software industry. If you think about leisure content, whether it's magazines or newspapers and books and music and movies and games, it's many times the size of the software industry.
Yes.
And if the tablet is the leisure computing device to enjoy all of this leisure content, intellectual property, and if the size of the market is related to the size of the content which we enjoy, then this tablet's going to be huge.
It's going to be huge. I have no doubt.
I think it's going to be huge. And I also think that we're going to get to a point now, we are at a point now, where we don't need to have one car. We're a multi-car family. We're a multi-television family. We'll be a multi-computer family. And so I think that the idea is very logical, it's very sensible, and I think it's very natural for people.
This is why earlier today, you probably heard me, I was talking with Ray Ozzie, and I'm trying to figure this out for myself and for everybody else. It seems to me that because of what you just said, there is in fact a lot of financial pressure pushing the phone and this device, this pad device, into its own energy system, into its own markets, into its own use profile. When you talk about leisure, whatever you want to call that use profile, leisure computing or entertainment plus leisure or lifestyle, and that is so large, and that there's so much money there, that keeping that bolted to the enterprise, for instance, may not be a smart thing to do. It may just break free. And there may still be lots of devices which, as Ray was suggesting, honor certain protocols which allow you to go in and out of the office. But this thing is really, I think, like a rocket. I think it's really going to go big time off on its own. And there will be a lot of developers who just write consumer-based apps for these devices and don't ever come back to the enterprise or to companies or business. Does that make sense to you?
Perfect sense. I mean, if these computing devices are going to become appliances, as Ray was talking about, there's all kinds of appliance markets where they don't think at all about the enterprise.
Right.
I mean, you make refrigerators, you don't think about the enterprise. You make televisions, you don't think about the enterprise. The enterprise gets the benefit from cheap refrigerators in their coffee rooms, and the enterprise gets the benefit from cheap televisions in their conference rooms. But in the final analysis, the market is so large in leisure computing that there is really no reason to be burdened with the needs of enterprise. I mean, you obviously oftentimes we'll have consumers where they would carry their computers, their personal computer, into the enterprise, and they want to make it useful there. And that puts back pressure on the IT department, and that's kind of some of the conversations you guys were having earlier. Our IT departments needs to be much, much more thoughtful about having systems that brings in or adopts these consumer devices and make them work inside our IT departments. You know, so far, our IT department, including mine, have just repelled it.
Yeah.
And it explains one of the reasons why I'm stuck on BlackBerry. Although I'm one of the early adopters of it, I'm anxious to get off of it.
There are a lot of two-device people in this world who have a BlackBerry or, you know.
I don't know how to get off of it
Yeah.
until we can figure out a way to get a modern operating system that isn't a consumer device that also works in the enterprise.
You're saying that, but you're also saying that at a time when one of the trends we haven't brought up yet is security, and where there is this kind of escalating concern about cyber war, and not meaning in the sense of what we used to call war, but meaning in the sense of trade secrets being stolen, or IP being stolen, or lost, or, you know, and so if I were CEO, maybe CIO, one of my main concerns, if I'm making large investments in IP, is how to not lose that, and that's got to be a problem. And so, at a time when you want to say, let's open up the kimono even further on the CIO floor, he's probably getting instructions from the CEO saying, by the way, I'm about to put $2 billion into the blueprints for this next whatever, and I'm not very interested in seeing it showing up in some foreign land for a buck.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know,
it's a big
people
problem.
talk about intellectual property that way. I happen to think that NVIDIA's intellectual property leaves the company every single night, and it's my job to get them to come back.
Please come back.
And so the vast majority of our most valuable intellectual property, unfortunately, is leaving the company all the time.
Yeah.
It's in the form of trade secrets,
Sure.
working knowledge, how I think. For example, what I said is less important than how I think.
Mm-hmm.
How the company thinks and how the company makes magic is far, far more valuable than the magic that was produced.
Yeah.
And so that sensibility is captured in our employees, our most valuable employees, and the people that are closer to the center, if you will, or closer to where the action is. The center, it doesn't have to be the center of the enterprise, it has to be center of where the action is.
Exactly.
And so those people, unfortunately, they come to the company, and after a certain amount of time, they leave the company. So your intellectual property is seeping out all the time.
It's exactly what Hegel and JSB were talking about a few minutes ago. If they're on the edge, and they've created a power structure of ideas, and they're bubbling away, and whatever the branches where they happen to be, or they may not even be in the same physicality, but they're on the same work team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And suppose I were to lose a spreadsheet on my laptop right now. You would have just seen an old spreadsheet where I was running some simulation about something that is of no use to me anymore. However, the knowledge of how NVIDIA works and why it is that over the course of time that we've been able to reinvent ourselves and create these things, that knowledge, unfortunately, is vital to the survival of our company, and I can't protect that.
Yeah.
I can't protect that through
Well, I was kind of thinking of the Tegra blueprint. You know, it's like that the night you launch, you don't want to have me showing up the next day as your competitor with the same thing. That'd be a bummer. But
it's an amazing thing. They just kind of happen. They do. You know, it's I know it's a bummer, and I would really be bummed if our next generation GPU database were to show up on the web.
Right.
On the other hand, if it was to show up on the web, I don't know who would do something with it.
Intel.
I don't. It would. No, Intel.
If you really don't know, I'll just tell you it's Intel. So
I heard
We'll get to that later.
I just heard that CUDA has become recommended reading for all
true.
computer architects at Intel now. It's good. It's a good book.
Yeah. All right. So let's flip this a little bit. Security. We talked briefly about this on the phone. You made a very interesting and I thought kind of funny comment about, you were laughing about it, because I was suggesting that what a great new tool for security using GPU chips, and you were laughing saying, well, actually, The hackers are using these already very effectively, and so in some
I was hoping it
senses-
just doesn't get talked about. It's not something I'm really proud of.
but it's it's the lay of the land for a lot of folks. So we're in a radar trap thing, aren't we? Where there's a radar trap, and here's the technology for detecting the radar trap, and now your technology is going to be a centerpiece part of that. So using GPUs, from whichever side one wants to play, is going to be the most elegant way of going about this thing.
Yeah, well, security is an arms race.
No.
And if the hackers have better computing technology than the people who are trying to protect the technology, that's a problem.
So we want to have people building.
And so we need people who are trying to protect us to have to be thoughtful about the arms race. And so I obviously, if GPUs are being used to hack passwords, it probably is a good idea for GPUs to be used to encrypt as well.
My point exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of thinking that might be a very neat business. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of that, but you would think that whether hardware-based or hardware plus software, we have so many issues. I won't even start telling you about my personal computer, but we have so many issues about trying to repel malware of various types. Right now we're losing the battle. And I think that it may be that technology that comes out of your laboratories could provide at least a breather for people who are suffering so much from this, they just don't know where to turn anymore.
Yeah, and you guys are talking about all of the right things about making computing experiences more secure. And one of the ways to do that is to transform it from an application and data environment into a services environment. And so cloud computing obviously is very important. We're investing a lot in remote rendering. Remote rendering is a technology that makes a lot of sense, and we can use the cloud to render whatever application you see. And it could be as simple as a desktop, it could be a video game, it could be a film, it could be the most amazing industrially designed sports car that you want to share with all of your design centers around the globe. We would do that rendering in a cloud, render it amazingly fast, compress it within a frame time, and stream it to you using H.264. And so you can now enjoy that experience, whether it's on a phone or a tablet or a computer, on a power wall, big projector like here. And so that technology, I think, and that capability, obviously, will try to deter some of the
So encrypted, and you couldn't do an encryption with a CPU; it just takes too long. But doing great encryption with a GPU could be done in real time, even while you're doing this ray tracing and everything else.
That's right. There are many things that and this is one of my favorites. I think it was at TED either last year. Nathan at a conference. Nathan, I think, showed a mosquito zapper.
Yeah.
And in the back is a little GPU running CUDA, doing motion detection and figuring out where the mosquitoes are, and figuring out whether it's male or female mosquitoes, and whether it's a mosquito at all, and firing a laser at it. And so there are all kinds of things that you could do in real time as a result of parallel computing.
Now, as an example, the difference between that conference that has no name and our conference, instead of doing the mosquito,
I need to bring you an amazing demo next year. I am the king of demos.
We'll do that.
We are all about eye candy.
We'll probably do it at the Fire Lab at Cal IT too.
We're all about eye candy.
I want to get to one more thing, which I know flows straight from this, and which I think is one of the most exciting future uses of your stuff and in computing. And you alluded to it briefly just now twice, and we call it wall computing.
Yeah.
So not projecting, but imagine that you've got a big plate glass thing, which is multi-touch sensitive and which can identify you versus me. Right? And there are 3 or 4 of us working. And we work for, I always use GE. So we work for GE, and we've got a problem. And historically, we would either have a board meeting with PowerPoints, or we would exchange emails with Excel sheets. So here what we do is we'd actually have real-time access to databases around the world. You're from manufacturing, I'm from design, somebody's from engineering, and the other guy's the CEO. And we're going to try to discuss this new product thing that we're going to get going. And where's it going to get built, and where's it going to get produced, and the ideas flow because we each are expert at doing this, whether it's gestural or touch. And we can actually compute together in real time.
I think it's just going to be a fabulous
Is that
thing.
something?
I totally agree with you on that. We want to light every single pixel in the world, and we don't care whether it's in your car, in your pocket, in a big signage, or frankly your wall. I'm a huge fan of augmented reality. I'm a huge fan of touch. I'm a huge fan of computer vision, and those technologies, when it comes together, and it's in the cloud, would allow you to create that very experience you just talked about. That very experience you just talked about. And we are so close.
Yeah.
We are so close. We could piece it together today. With enough resources, we could piece it together today. And so I think the technology is getting there. And on the one hand, we want to make sure that we don't get myopic about and fall in love with technology, because in the final analysis, it's not what technology provides, is what it provides for people. However, if we don't invest in the technology, we can't create these magical experiences that you just described come true someday.
Exactly.
And so augmented reality is going to be a big deal. Augmented reality it will likely be Nvidia's greatest contribution to computing someday. And I can't wait until where computing starts and computer graphics starts and the real world ends and starts is indiscernible.
Yeah. And where we, as we interact with each other, acquire these amazing tools in real time, and allows us not just to have that reality be augmented, but our reality.
That's right.
Yeah.
And imagine, and what you just described is a video conferencing environment where the camera is, and the processing behind the camera and the image processing behind the camera makes you and I feel like we're actually looking at each other and being with each other. Today, we kind of look past each other.
Yeah.
If you sit in those video conferencing rooms, as the fidelity is wonderful, the video fidelity is wonderful, when you make eye contact, you're never really looking at each other.
Right.
And so that it breaks that
trust.
It breaks the trust. It breaks that sense that you're actually in a room with somebody. But eye contact is something we can fix. A little bit of computer vision, a little bit of 3D graphics, a little bit of augmented reality. I think we're going to get you there.
So bringing it back to people really matters. We have 8 minutes, and I would like to have people have a chance to ask you questions. So if there's anyone here who has a question, please step up to the microphone and feel free. Identify yourself and your company and fire away. And if you don't, we'll just keep chatting. Going once, going twice. Oh, here's somebody.
Thank you very much. I'm TA from GIST. I'm interested, you've created such a great company. What are the 2 or 3 things that you sort of feel are fundamental to the people who are working at Nvidia? Culturally speaking.
I said something the other day during an interview that the interviewer asked me several times just for clarity. I made the comment that if you want to build a successful company in our field, in my line of work, which is invention and creating things that the world's never seen before, you have to develop a high tolerance for failure. And it has to be an institutional tolerance for failure. And it has to be an institutional tolerance for lack of predictability, because you just don't know where that next invention is going to come from, especially when you're out on the fringe developing these new experiences. And so I thought that was particularly complicated for this particular journalist to grok, because he doesn't hear CEOs talk about failure very often. I don't want to fail, but the journey is important. And when you're taking the journey to a successful place, you'll likely fail often. And I think that teaching our employees that, and creating a company that is culturally comfortable with that idea, makes it possible for us to innovate. You can't force innovation down people's throat if you don't allow them to fail every now and then. And so I think that is a very important concept. There is no secret sauce of bringing all of the world's, or much of the world's, great talents in a particular field to your company. First of all, you have to love to work, and you have to love to work not just because it's good business, but you have to love to work for the work's sake. And I think that leaders have to really exude that in a genuine way, because they really love to work. And before you know it, people who also love that work will come to your company. And so I think that those two things probably are, if I had to identify two, are pretty big deals for us. And then, of course, the last thing is given those two things, in the final analysis, you have to succeed, because people like to succeed. People like to see their work show up in the marketplace. And the definition of success, comes in a lot of different forms. For example, I think that it's just fabulous and is a wonderful definition of success that the work that we do helps somebody enjoy the Olympics more, or the work that we do helped a particular scientist discover a new cure for a particular flu. I think that those are wonderful things. I think it's fabulous that we're helping scientists around the world visualize new materials so that they could build lighter things that are more fuel efficient. And so you have to feel a great sense of success, not just in financial terms. That's really important, and it's in fact necessary so that we can fund our R&D, but you have to feel a great sense of success in helping the world solve great problems.
Hi, Mark Binger with Flex Research.
Hi, Mark.
Admiring how you've jumped from platform to platform, from screens to devices to lots of different formats. I was curious what you see coming in the future. So specifically things like flexible displays or printed electronics. If you see that as a threat or an opportunity, and where in time, how many years away do you see that really becoming a business for you?
Well, first of all, they're all opportunities, and there are opportunities in my mind because we don't define ourselves as a PC computer graphics company or a workstation computer graphics company or anything like that. We want to help you enjoy your computing experience. And the area that we are particularly good at is the visual area. We're particularly good at the visual experience of helping you enjoy computing. And so whether it's in your car or your laptop or your tablet or a flexible display, we would be delighted to help you enjoy that experience. The things that I'm excited about with respect to displays, obviously 3D displays that require no glasses are around the corner. I mean, they're not quite 2 years away, but it's certainly no more than 5 years away. So the way dimensionalizing, not causing a giant monster to come out at you, but to dimensionalize the computing experience will be quite amazing, frankly, for a lot of people. The other thing that I'm excited about, I love translucent displays. Transparent LCDs and translucent displays is a stepping stone, is an enabler for augmented reality for the mass market. Just as touch displays has made it possible for us to create a new type of device with tablets and smartphones, translucent displays will be very important in the future. Imagine all of the windows in your car are no longer glasses; they're displays. And what is the implication of that in the context of driving at night or sun glare or you name it? So one of the most amazing technologies, and I wish I could experience it. We helped create it. Is head-mounted displays for pilots.
Yeah, super.
And when they look down, they don't see their chair; they see below their plane. Now, if that's not freaky, I don't know what is. Now, why shouldn't you be driving like that as well? Why are there blind spots? And so these type of experiences are going to be possible with some of these enabling technologies. Translucent LCD is one of them.
Yeah, the whole, I didn't have a chance to ask Ray about Sync, but Microsoft's done a magnificent job with Ford and Sync, and people are now buying Fords because Sync is in it.
Right.
And that whole the whole car platform, which now I think has more computers in it than an office, is fascinating.
But it's the most mobile computer.
Yeah. I forget what number, but there are like 100 computers in a normal car now.
Right.
That's just got to be the most exciting.
That's a big market for us in the future. Where another thing about cars, the benefit of efficient computing is so important in cars because it directly translates to weight and fuel efficiency.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much fuel you can save if your computer in the car just consumes less energy.
Mm-hmm. Now, we're out of time, but I do want to ask you one more question because it's a big subject. Goliath, Intel.
Oh, you can't ask me Intel in 3 seconds.
No, we're going to take a little more.
Okay. It'll take me at least 10 seconds.
Let's do the 3-minute thing on it because you have had the guts to challenge these guys. You've challenged them technically. You're challenging them in court now. And I think it's important for your case to go forward, and it's important for, as we know, the FTC, the New York and Delaware are bringing similar suits. Other countries have already brought similar suits. Freedom is good in technology, and I don't know why you're not free to make every chipset you want to make and so forth, but if you want to wrap that up in a couple of minutes and just tell us where you think this Intel thing is going to go, I would think that'd be
Well, first of all, what's interesting about our relationship with Intel is that we don't make anything they make, and they actually don't make anything we make. So this is one of those weird relationships where I believe it's not about direct competition, but it's the competition of relevance. We make processors that they will have to make someday. Mm-hmm. And so there's this tension between us that I think is related to that. Visual computing is just more and more important than ever, and then that creates tension. We're not trying to confront them. We're just trying to protect ourselves. Mm-hmm. You know, we didn't sue them; they sued us, and the FTC took their own action. And so we're trying to, all we're trying to do is just to focus on visual computing and make a contribution to the world in this particular area that we're really passionate about. We're very good at it, and the good news and the bad news. The good news is that whereas it started out as a rather niche market, when Nvidia first started, when we first started the company in 1993, there were already giants in the world. Silicon Graphics, HP, IBM were all in the computer graphics industry, and PC graphics had giants in the world. However, our vision was that computer graphics was going to transform from being just a tool for workstation engineers. It would be an even better tool for them, but it would become a medium where we could revolutionize people's experiences for all kinds of computing. And so that slight perspective put us here.
Right in the way.
Right in the middle. And so the bad news is that it's too important now.
Yeah.
And so, we're going to do our best to keep building things that are amazing, and hopefully that gets us through.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you, Mark.